Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Logan Mitchell always believed that a real marriage stood on mutual respect. For 4 years, he worked hard to keep that principle alive at home. Married to Avery since turning 30, Logan learned to handle his wife's outgoing nature, her independence, the bold jokes, the long hugs with old friends. From the start, Jordan was the one most present between them. Avery's best friend from college, he was part of the routine, the stories, the dinners. Logan didn't think it was necessary to start conflict over an old friendship, especially with someone who had known her even before he came into her life. He tried to coexist. He tried to fit in. He tried to believe that his place as husband was clear to everyone. But little by little, he started to see that there were spaces he wasn't even invited to enter. Jordan called late at night, sent memes, videos, and confessions. Avery shared things with him that Logan only found out later, by accident. It was as if Jordan knew more about her mood, her frustrations, her fears, than her own husband did. One time, Logan came home early and heard her laughing in the living room. When he walked in, he found them watching a movie, sitting too close together on the couch. Jordan's expression was relaxed, far too comfortable for someone who didn't own the house. When Avery saw him, she only remarked that he'd come home earlier than planned. That sentence echoed in his head for days. Logan never had solid proof that there was anything beyond friendship between them. But that wasn't even the point. The lack of intimacy between him and his wife is what hurt him. The real closeness always seemed reserved for Jordan. On birthdays, Avery got gifts from the friend that felt tailor-made. Jordan knew which perfume she wanted before she bought it herself. He knew her favorite ice cream flavor when Logan messed up the order. He knew the names of her favorite professors, while Logan could barely remember a single college story she'd told with excitement. Those little things piled up, building an invisible wall between them. Logan felt like a permanent guest in his own marriage. Present in the photos, absent in the stories. Then Avery brought up the annual trip with friends to Clearwater Beach. It was a traditional college reunion. Logan had never been invited. Avery always said it was, just for them, an old tradition. This year, he decided to talk more directly. He sat with her and told her how he felt. He said it wasn't about control but about respect. He explained he was uncomfortable with the trip, especially with Jordan going. He was honest, saying he felt excluded, replaced, even mocked when he watched the two of them interact like an emotional couple. Avery listened with her arms crossed. She said he was overreacting, that Jordan was like a brother. Logan replied that if that was true, then she could show she prioritized their marriage. He suggested she stay home that year. Not as an order, but as a request, a gesture to restore balance. Avery's answer came fast, almost rehearsed. She said it was an attempt to limit her, that he was becoming jealous and controlling. Logan got up from the table and left the conversation without yelling. He preferred to avoid more friction. But inside, something broke. In the following days, she kept planning the trip. She packed clothes, bought a new bikini, laughed loudly on the phone. Logan watched in silence. A kind of silence that screamed louder than any argument. When she left, he didn't walk her to the door. He sat in the living room, staring at his phone, waiting for some sign of regret, a last message, any gesture showing there was still something to save. But all he got were social media notifications. Avery smiling in selfies, surrounded by friends, always with Jordan beside her. In one picture, he had his hand on her waist while she leaned her head on his shoulder. The caption read, "With the one who understands even the silence." Logan closed the app. He put the phone in a drawer and went to get a glass of water. He spent the next days without calling or texting. He chose to let her live it the way she thought was right. But inside him, a certainty grew more solid. A marriage where he had to beg for respect was already on life support. And maybe the trip to Clearwater was exactly the point where he would stop fighting alone. The Clearwater trip was the perfect break Avery needed, but for Logan, it was the moment when everything stopped making sense. He stayed home with the silence, with the absence of any contact, while watching the woman who had sworn to stand by his side show herself to the world as if there were no ring on her finger. Each new image posted felt like a reminder that he had lost space, not only in her life, but in the very story they were writing together. And even without words, she said everything. The caption on the last photo spoke louder than any conversation they'd had in months. Right then, Logan understood that love, no matter how genuine, doesn't survive when only one side keeps it standing. She came back home Monday afternoon. She didn't even ask if he wanted to talk. She just walked in, dropped the suitcases in the corner, took off her sunglasses, and acted like she'd gone to the grocery store. Logan watched. Her eyes were cold, a kind of coldness he had never seen in the woman he loved. She greeted him with a vague nod, went upstairs, and stayed there for hours. He waited. Not for an apology. Not for explanations. He waited to see if there was still room for rescue. And when she finally came down for a glass of water, he had already laid everything out on the dining room table. The documents were stacked beside a brown envelope. Avery looked puzzled. He just said he was moving forward with what needed to be done. She asked what that was. Logan answered firmly that it was the start of their separation. Avery laughed, thinking he was bluffing. She said he was being dramatic, that all she had done was spend a few days with friends. Logan kept his eyes on her, and for the first time in years, she seemed unsettled. He opened the envelope and spread out some printouts on the table, the Instagram photos, friends' playful comments, screenshots of public conversations where she replied with suggestive emojis. One image caught Avery's eye in particular. It was her, sitting on the sand next to Jordan, her hand resting on his leg. The caption was highlighted, "With him, I forget the world." Logan didn't yell. He only asked, "Did you forget about me too while you posted this?" She tried to say it was a joke, that he was misreading it, that Jordan was just a friend. Logan, calmer than she expected, said the problem was much bigger than that caption. He explained he had been swallowing situations for a long time. He had always tried to respect her space. He tried to trust, even while suffering the pain of being left aside. But now he finally understood what was happening. And the truth was simple, she made choices, and he was always the sacrifice of those choices. Avery folded her arms and defended herself. She said he was playing the victim, that their marriage had been worn out for a while, that he had pulled away too. Logan cut in, his voice steady, and said he withdrew because he felt invisible. Every time she put Jordan first, a part of him died inside. Every time she laughed at Jordan's jokes while the two of them ate alone and he was excluded, he learned to live with less of her. The issue was never the trip, but the repetition of the same story. She then went on the offensive. She said he never understood her independence, that Jordan was the only one who supported her, that he, Logan, always judged her. He stayed quiet for a few seconds before replying. He said it wasn't judgment, it was frustration. He spent 4 years waiting for her to finally see that marriage is partnership, not competition with old friendships. And that her problem was confusing attention with affection. She chased adrenaline, likes, quick reactions, but no longer knew what it meant to build something with effort. He pointed at the papers and said, "The difference between you and me is that I tried. Even bleeding, I tried." She stood frozen in front of him, as if suddenly hit by reality. For the first time, Logan saw fear of loss in her eyes. But it was too late. He said the love he felt still existed, but it wasn't enough. Because love without respect is just attachment. And he was tired of living on the scraps she left him. The paperwork was ready, the date set for dividing assets. He told her he would spend the night out and be back the next morning. Avery sat at the table for hours after he left. She flipped through the photos, read the comments, reviewed everything she had done in the last few days. Alone, she realized her mistake wasn't just the trip. It was turning into routine what should have been an exception. It was testing the limits of someone who had warned her, in every way, that he was hurt. And now, with his absence in the house, she felt the real weight of decisions she had treated like games. Logan, across town, slept in a hotel room, no regret, but with a pain no one could see. He had always been willing to fight, but at that moment, he just wanted peace. Logan came home early that morning, as promised. When he opened the door, Avery wasn't in the living room. The house was tidy, everything in place, except for them. He walked to the kitchen, made coffee in silence, and sat down. There was no rush to solve anything right then, because, deep down, he already knew something inside him had changed for good. The pain was still there, but it had become less confusing. It was no longer a pain begging for attention, it was the kind that arrives when you realize you've lost something that no longer made sense to keep. Avery came downstairs without makeup, her eyes marked by a sleepless night. She sat across from him. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she asked if there was still a chance to talk before signing any papers. Logan nodded briefly. She started trying to justify everything again, but in a different tone. She said she felt she needed that trip to find herself. That she was suffocating in the marriage, without her own identity, trying to fit a role that wasn't hers. He listened, silently. Then she admitted she might have gone overboard with the posts, that maybe she should have spared their life from that exposure. Logan interrupted and said the problem wasn't the photo or the caption. The problem was what she'd made of him over the years. And that when someone spends too much time trying to find themselves away from their partner, they've been lost for a long time. She tried to say she was willing to change, that she could distance herself from Jordan if that would bring the relationship back. But Logan leaned forward and asked, "Why didn't you think about that before? Why does it only seem possible now? When did I stop being enough?" Avery stayed quiet for a few seconds. She answered that she didn't know. That maybe she was so busy proving her independence that she forgot to take care of what really mattered. Logan took a deep breath. He told her she needed to understand that independence is different from selfishness. The marriage hadn't suffocated who she was, it had revealed how much emotional immaturity she still carried. Her friends, the invitations that never included him, the hidden conversations, the ambiguous jokes with Jordan, all of that was a kind of betrayal that left no marks on the body but dissolved the bond day by day. Avery cried. She begged him to forgive her. She said she would do anything to fix it. But Logan, eyes filled with tears, replied that forgiveness wasn't the problem. He forgave her. He always forgave her. He forgave when she talked to Jordan beside him as if he were invisible. He forgave when she prioritized invitations with friends over dinners together. He forgave when she laughed loudly on the phone with someone who knew her deepest fears while her own husband knew only the surface. What he couldn't do anymore was keep accepting that all of that was called love. In the following days, Avery tried to talk to her friends. She expected some support, but the response was different. Claire, her best friend, was direct. She said she'd always found the level of intimacy between Avery and Jordan weird and admired Logan's patience. She added that if Avery had put herself in his shoes for a second, she might have noticed how far she was crossing the line. Avery's mother, who had always defended her, was even harsher. She said respect is the foundation, and Avery had confused freedom with neglect. That shook Avery in a different way. For the first time, the people around her weren't confirming her version of the story. They weren't validating the image she had crafted of the misunderstood wife. She realized she had spent years testing the limits of someone who only wanted to be part of her life. Her defense of independence had become a trench, an excuse to avoid vulnerability. Jordan, the big friend, was confronted by Logan, who sent a single message: "You knew. You saw everything. And you still went on." Jordan never replied. He disappeared for weeks. Avery called, texted, even tried to find him at a mutual friend's house, but got no answer. That's when she understood that when everything collapses, the people who seemed solid disappear first. Logan, meanwhile, was living the grief of ending a story he'd tried to save until the last chapter. He felt no anger, only exhaustion. He kept up with the legal procedures, answered the lawyers, organized the move to a small apartment in another part of town. He wasn't seeking distance for revenge, but to breathe. A space just for him. A place where he could hear himself again. Because the marriage had gotten so loud inside that he'd forgotten who he was outside the relationship. Avery walked through memories, scrolling old photos, listening to voice notes from years ago where Logan still called her, "my home." And that's when she understood what she had lost. Logan never wanted to trap anyone. He wanted someone who chose him every day, even with the freedom to leave. And she, without noticing, chose to drift away from him little by little while swearing she was staying. That's the kind of pain you don't see in pictures, but it leaves invisible scars on the one who held on for too long. And now she felt firsthand what it means to look at a love that still exists but is no longer yours. A few weeks later, Logan and Avery met again in front of the courthouse, each with a folder of documents and a different look than they used to trade. She seemed more restrained, less impulsive. He was calm, with no visible bitterness, but with a steadiness that needed no explanation. After they finished signing the papers, still seated at the table, she slowly turned to him and, her voice breaking, said she was sorry. She apologized for everything, for the choices, the attitudes, the words that hurt, and the absences he never deserved to face alone. She was sincere, but it was already useless. Logan took a deep breath before answering. He looked into her eyes and said he accepted the apology. He held no hatred and wished her no harm. He truly hoped she would find peace. But he made it clear, with an almost painful serenity, that there was no coming back. That story had reached its end. And now, finally, she was free to live life the way she always wanted, just without him. Avery nodded in silence, swallowing what was left of hope. Because for the first time, she understood that losing a real love is different from just drifting away from someone. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.